I got to ask you about relationships, because you were probably one of the most vocal guys about his polyamorous journey, I guess I'd call that, over the past, I don't know, 8 years. And now you've recently gotten married, and I think are going on a monogamous journey. And maybe you can talk about that. Like I said, I think you're one of the more public guys that talked about this stuff in a space where many guys are curious. A lot of guys, well, don't know much about it. And you were always really honest. And describing it sometimes is almost like an ego-destroying experience. So maybe paint the picture and walk us through.
Almost.
Almost. I know it could be 6 hours on this, but tell me about that adventure.
Well, yeah, that was, it's a huge part of my life. Another one of the greatest learning tools that I've ever experienced, because, man, I vastly overlooked how challenging it would be. So basically, here's the idea that you have to understand that I was one of those people who really validated himself a lot based on the partner that I had, based on my own sexual prowess, based on my own attractiveness, based on how many people love me. So when you're in that kind of framework, and this is a normal thing, we're so many people are like this. So when you're in that framework, also I like different experiences, and I love people. I just love people, and I find beautiful things about different people. So I was in a lot of relationships, but ultimately I would always get kind of restless in those relationships. One, because I would exhaust all of the validation that I could get from my current partner, and I would need new validation. So I was kind of a serial monogamist. I had some longer relationships, but still that kind of pressure was pushing in. So with my partner, Whitney, again, 18 months was about that time where like the pressure would start to mount, and I'd be like, I really want to go out and do something. And I wasn't someone who would cheat. Just because of the pure pressure and anxiety of it, it just didn't sit right with me. And it was not something that I was willing to do. And, that's a solution for a lot of different people. They're just unfaithful. And so they get that validation and they kind of cheat the system and then just bear the cost of that infidelity. It wasn't a cost that I was willing to bear. So I read Chris Ryan's book, Sex at Dawn, and it talked about how within the tribes, there was a lot of sexual fluidity, that people were allowed to sleep with each other. The Eskimos, for example, like one of the reasons we call each other Eskimo brothers was because the chief would allow guests of honor to sleep with his wife when they would come in. So there's different rules, the different tribes in Africa where there were nomadic tribes, and people would go out, the men would go out and they would leave one man behind, and the man would service all of the women sexually in the whole tribe, and that would rotate. So there's different ideas and frameworks around sexuality. Dr. Wednesday Martin wrote another great book called Untrue, which is good to explore the anthropological and scientific reasons behind, this kind of polyamorous look. So I had that, and I started to understand that. And then I started to understand my philosophy about love is that love and pleasure shouldn't be something that is possessed, that this is something that nobody should own. Nobody should own love. Love is like the sun. It just shines, and sexuality shouldn't be controlled and owned. So I had these concepts. So I talked to my partner, Whitney, and I was like, look, I think we should go polyamorous. I think we should go open relationship. She's like, fuck that. Like, I'm out. And I was like, all right, I gotta do this. So I was single for a little while, and then we started talking, and she's like, all right, like, I'm willing to give it a go. Like, I think I'm going to hate it, but I'm willing to give it a go. So she agreed to give it a go. And then I got a partner first in that. And I started seeing that partner, and it was really hard for her, like really hard. And I had no compassion. I was like, we agreed to this. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you crying? Like, what's going on? And then, so that carried on for a little while. And then she got a partner. And when she got a partner, and I was actually away on like a spiritual dieta actually at the time. So I found out it was a crazy story actually, which is kind of amusing. So I'm leaving on this isolation diet where I'm going to have no phone contact. I'm not going to talk to her. And she was starting to date this guy, and he was supposed to be leaving the same day as me, and they hadn't slept together. Well, I'm going to catch my flight, and on another flight, they start announcing his name. And they're like, I'm not going to use his real name. They're like, Travis so-and-so, you're about to miss your flight, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, that motherfucker stayed. He's going to sleep with my girl. I know it. But I had no way to check because we were out of contact at that point. So then I arrive, I go through, I'm thinking about it the whole time on this diet. I'm like, I know they did. I bet they did it. And then I get the call. And I was like, hey, the craziest thing, I heard him. He didn't catch his flight. Did you guys end up sleeping together? She's like, yep. And at that point I was like, okay, cool. I'll call you back. And I felt a feeling that I'd never felt before. Like I didn't know if I wanted to vomit, cry, or start punching the wall. It was like this overwhelming, like guttural response that I had. And I spent that whole day just trying to reconcile it. And it was brutal. I mean, I would think about every new position. I would think about them sleeping together in, like, oh my God, he's hitting it from behind. Oh my God, doggy style. Like, and I would want to vomit again. I would think about every sexual act and it would be this visceral response. And I started to get it. I was like, oh, I get why you were having a hard time with this. But of course I was committed. You know, I was like, I got to work through this. Like this is my own shit that I got to deal with. And so that started the journey. 5 years continued. The challenges continued because what was the first difficult thing was the sexuality. The most difficult thing is when it started to involve love, you know, and my partner ended up falling in love with somebody at Burning Man, and I ended up, you know, having to deal with that. And I'd had, you know, significant love for somebody else as well, which was incredibly tumultuous. So not only sharing sexuality, but sharing love, which then, you know, reduces the amount of validation you have and you feel like you're unworthy. You know, I remember comparing myself to all her partners. She would be with a great athlete and I would start training in his sport. And then I'd realize he should be with a fighter and I'd start hitting the bag. And I'd be like, what are you doing? You're never going to be as good as him at that. Just be you. So you learn to start to appreciate yourself for the essence of who you are and not try to compare and compete with other people. But it's a brutal, brutal path. And it never really got easy. You get better at it and you start to learn to appreciate who you are and start to appreciate the experiences that you have with people. And it's also beautiful too, because you have the freedom to explore and meet people. I actually met my wife when I was in that polyamorous experience, and we didn't have an intimate relationship, but we were at Burning Man again, the first time at Burning Man, not the time my partner fell in love. But we got to flirt and hang out, and there was just the freedom to explore different things. And I'm just so grateful that Whitney was willing to take that journey with me and explore all of these different possibilities. But after doing that for 6 years, it never really got to the point where we were deepening the relationship. When things would get kind of tumultuous, we'd always have another outlet. Be like, all right, cool. Like, we'll cool this one off. I'll go spend time with my other girl. You go spend time with your boy. And we'll come back together if we want to later. So there was always like an escape valve, you know. So like you said, like the beauty of how much you love your kids is you couldn't escape it. You know, you were in there and you had to do the work to really love them. Well, this always gave another outlet. So I started to feel like, you know what, like I want to try a different way. And then, you know, after really getting the opportunity to connect with who's now my wife in a more intimate way, I was like, aha, like this is the path forward. And I really started to envision what union would look like, where instead of looking for things externally, like the practice was just to deepen the relationship, deepen it, explore more, you know, start, you know, looking at the work that Mantak Chia is doing, like you mentioned, and say like, all right, what are the 4 gates? I only know like the basics, like how can we take this deeper and how can we explore further and go to the depths of what relationship is capable of in a container where we feel safe and we just feel like we're unconditionally loved. And that's been an incredibly beautiful and healing journey to just be in that kind of partnership where I know that we're just there for each other. And this is not one of these things like we're going to get married and try it out. And if it doesn't work, like I'm all in, like burn the boats, all in. I'm riding this. We're going to ride or die together.